I always believed that love, especially the love between a parent and child, was unconditional, that it would never twist into something cruel. That trust, once given, once earned, was sacred. So when I sat across from my only son, Mark, and signed over the deed to the house, the power of attorney, the savings account, everything, I did so with the kind of trust that takes a lifetime to build. I never imagined that same trust would be the weapon used to destroy me. It started with a conversation in our sunlit kitchen, the one he grew up in. I had just turned 68, and Mark, now in his early 30s, was urging me to plan for the future. "Mom," he said, placing a comforting hand over mine, "you've worked your whole life. Let me take care of you now. You should be relaxing, not worrying about bills or paperwork." I smiled, proud of the man he had become, or so I thought. At his suggestion, we visited a lawyer. I signed documents I barely glanced at, legal language I trusted Mark to understand. He assured me it was all routine. "You'll still live here. Nothing changes. This just protects your assets and helps avoid probate when the time comes," he explained. I nodded. I wanted to believe in the goodness of my child, but then things started to shift. Quietly, slowly, and then all at once. It was little things, at first. Mark started questioning my spending habits. I overheard hushed conversations with his girlfriend, Sabrina, about space and freedom. He began treating the house less like my home and more like his property. Furniture was moved without asking. My beloved rose garden was ripped out to make room for a concrete patio upgrade. Still, I told myself not to overreact. He was just helping, just nesting maybe. After all, I had raised him to be independent, to take initiative. Then came the day I'll never forget. I walked into the kitchen and overheard him on the phone. His voice calm, matter of fact. "Yeah, the house is in my name now. She's not a problem. We're giving her 2 months to find somewhere else. The lawyer said we're good to go." I froze. The air turned thick, heavy. My heart hammered in my chest as his words sank in like poison. I stood there, invisible in the hallway, my breath caught in my throat. "We're giving her 2 months. He and Sabrina. My son. The boy I held through nightmares, whose scraped knees I bandaged, who I stayed up with through the flu in college. Heartbreaks. That son was plotting to throw me out of the very home I built for him. I didn't confront him right away. I couldn't. The betrayal was too raw, too big to even wrap my mind around. I felt like I was living in someone else's nightmare. Was this really happening? Could my own child, my flesh and blood, be capable of this? I didn't sleep that night or the next. I just kept hearing his voice. "She's not a problem." As if I were some burden, an obstacle in his path. Grief came first. Deep, aching grief. Then shame. How could I have been so blind? But beneath all that, something else began to stir. Rage. Not loud or explosive. Cold. Steady. It burned low and quiet, warming the place where love had frozen. If he wanted a problem, I would become one. Because if Mark thought he could manipulate me, use me, discard me like I didn't matter, he had no idea who he was dealing with. He may have the house on paper, but he didn't have the whole story. Not yet. The next morning, I sat across from Mark at the same kitchen table where we'd shared birthday cakes, school projects, and late-night talks. Only this time, the silence between us felt like a canyon. "Mark," I began, forcing my voice to stay calm. "I overheard your phone call yesterday." He didn't flinch, didn't even pretend to be surprised. He just looked up from his coffee and raised an eyebrow. "What call?" he asked casually. "The one where you said I wasn't a problem. The one where you and Sabrina were planning to give me 2 months to move out." That's when I saw it. The flicker of irritation, the mask slipping. He sighed like I was being difficult. "Mom, don't take it the wrong way," he said, as if betrayal could be softened by tone. "It's just time. Sabrina and I, we need our own space." And you'll be better off somewhere smaller. This house is too much for you to handle now. I raised you in this house, I snapped. I paid every mortgage, every repair. You had no issue letting me do it all while you were growing up. And now you think you can push me out like I'm some guest overstaying her welcome. He didn't apologize. He didn't even look ashamed. Instead, he said, "It's not personal, Mom. It's my house now, legally." And there it was, the truth I hadn't wanted to admit until now. It was legal. I had signed over the deed. I had handed him everything, trusting that he would protect what I built, not seize it. And now, because of that trust, I was powerless, on paper at least. For the next few days I went through the motions, making tea, doing laundry, cooking dinners he barely acknowledged. Every moment was laced with tension. I could feel the countdown ticking in the back of my mind. Sabrina started showing up, more often, walking around like the lady of the house, her perfume lingering in rooms I used to find comfort in. She began redecorating without asking. She moved my family photos into boxes. My husband's portrait, Mark's father, disappeared from the hallway wall. When I asked about it, she said, "We're just updating the space. It needs a fresher vibe." A fresher vibe. I was being erased from my own life, little by little, and no one cared. I confided in my neighbor Gloria over coffee. Her eyes widened in disbelief when I told her what had happened. "But can he do that?" she asked. I nodded, ashamed. I gave him everything, signed it all over, the house, the savings. He has full control. Gloria shook her head. "You need to talk to someone, a lawyer, a professional. There has to be something you can do." But I already had. I'd spoken with the same lawyer who helped us draft the documents. Mark had insisted on using him. And now I understood why. The man had been on Mark's side the whole time. I felt boxed in, powerless. My son had the law on his side, a girlfriend whispering poison in his ear, and my own guilt working against me. How do you fight back when you've already surrendered everything? I spent nights awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how it had come to this. Wondering how someone I loved so deeply could see me as a nuisance, as disposable. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized something important. I may have signed over my rights on paper, but I wasn't done yet. He thought the game was over. He was wrong. I started reading, researching, quietly, methodically. I spoke to new lawyers, looked up elder abuse laws, financial exploitation, unjust, enrichment. I started taking notes, writing everything down. Every comment, every change in the house, every cold shoulder. If Mark and Sabrina wanted a battle, I was going to give them one. And this time, I would fight smart. Because trust might have been my weakness, but now, knowledge would be my weapon. The betrayal wasn't just a personal wound. It was an earthquake that cracked open everything I had built my life around. My security, my dignity, my legacy. This house wasn't just walls and paint. It was where I brought Mark home from the hospital. Where we had snowball fights in the yard and birthday parties with crooked cakes. Where my husband, Henry, and I built a life together before cancer took him too soon. His memory lived in these rooms. His laughter still echoed faintly in the hallway if I let myself drift too far into memory. And now, the son we raised with every ounce of love we had was planning to evict me like an unwanted tenant. This mattered because I wasn't just losing a roof over my head. I was being erased from my own story. And for what? Convenience, control, a power trip fed by a woman who barely knew me. I saw it more clearly every day. Sabrina was pulling strings behind the scenes, egging him on. I would catch bits of their conversations. We could rent this place out for way more if she wasn't here. Or, why don't we just move her into one of those senior apartments? You'd have your office back. My son, my flesh and blood, had become cold, clinical, detached. He wasn't thinking about what was right. He was thinking about what was easy. And I knew, deep down, this wasn't just about me anymore. I thought of my late husband. how disappointed he would be, how ashamed. I thought of the other mothers out there who might be tricked into signing away their lives under the illusion of trust and love. This mattered because it wasn't just one bad decision. It was the gateway to being stripped of agency, one signature at a time. It mattered because I wasn't just some old woman losing her home. I was a warning, a lesson waiting to be learned the hard way. And still, as much as I wanted justice, I didn't want revenge for its own sake. I didn't want to hurt Mark. Not really. What I wanted was for him to see what he had become, to feel the consequences of what he'd done. I wanted him to remember who raised him, and understand what it cost to betray that kind of love. But to do that, I had to be strategic. I couldn't lash out emotionally. I had to be cold, calculated, like he had been with me. So I went quiet. Let them think I was sulking. Let them think I was too shocked or too tired to fight. Meanwhile, I started documenting everything. Wrote down every time they changed something in the house without my consent. Every insult. Every comment about me being in the way. I saved receipts for groceries they stopped paying for. Tracked utility bills I still covered while they enjoyed their ownership of the house. I even started recording conversations, quietly, subtly, with a little voice recorder Gloria lent me. She'd been a godsend through all of this, my anchor when I felt like drowning. "Get everything," she'd said. "You're not just protecting yourself. You're creating a case, one they can't talk their way out of." And she was right, because this wasn't just about getting back at Mark. This was about making sure people like him couldn't do this to someone else. This was about reclaiming my narrative before they rewrote me as a burden and pushed me into the margins. And more than anything, this was about standing up, not just for me, but for every parent who gave too much, trusted too blindly, and paid the price. He thought I would go quietly. He had no idea who he was dealing with. There comes a moment when sorrow turns to steel. That moment came one rainy afternoon, while I sat staring at the rose bush Sabrina had dug up for her. Patio plans. That single blooming rose used to be Henry's favorite. He called it the heart of the garden. Watching it gone, the soil now flattened and ugly, something inside me clicked. They had taken so much already. My peace, my voice, my home. I decided, right then, I was going to take it all back. But not in the way they expected. I wasn't going to beg or cry or throw tantrums like they might have predicted. No. I was going to make it hurt. The same way they had hurt me, slowly, surgically. First, I needed legal leverage. I called a new lawyer, not the snake Mark had arranged, but someone independent. A woman named Teresa Burns, highly recommended by Gloria's niece. She specialized in elder abuse and property fraud. I laid everything out for her. The deed transfer, the financial documents, the manipulation, the recordings. I showed her everything. When I was done, she looked at me and said, "They may have your signature, but that doesn't mean they have a free pass. If we can prove undue influence, manipulation, or elder financial abuse, you've got a real shot." It was the first time in weeks that I'd felt something like hope. Teresa helped me file a petition to contest the transfer under grounds of coercion and exploitation. We started building a case. Emails, voice recordings, witness statements. From Gloria. Receipts showing I was still financially supporting the house, despite it being his. But the legal route was only part of the plan. Next came the public part. Mark prided himself on his social image. He ran a local real estate agency, and his whole persona was built on being community-focused and family-oriented. I knew that if his reputation took a hit, he'd feel the heat. So I reached out to a local community watchdog group, a small but vocal organization that advocated for senior rights and against financial exploitation. They were more than interested in my story, and once they had the proof, they promised to publish a feature. Of course, I wasn't going to tell Mark any of this yet. Let him keep thinking I was just quietly fading out. Let him keep walking around. This house like a king, unaware that the walls were closing in. I began baiting him gently, getting him to repeat things he'd said before. Sometimes I'd act confused. Other times, just compliant. I wanted him comfortable. I wanted him to say the wrong thing at the right moment. And he did, over and over again. One night, after a few glasses of wine, he laughed and said, "You know, I probably should have waited to get your signature. But hey, it worked out. You trusted me too much." That was the one. The recording that made Teresa smile and say, "We've got him." But even with all that, I still had one more card to play. I began quietly reaching out to old friends, explaining the situation. Not asking for help, but letting the truth ripple out. I needed people to see the real story before Mark tried to spin it. And then, I went through the boxes Sabrina had packed away. My memories, my husband's things, our life in albums and letters. I found Henry's old will. His handwritten words saying, "The house goes to Margaret. Always. It's hers, no matter what." It wasn't legally binding anymore. But emotionally, it carried weight. I scanned it, saved it, added it to the folder I was building. By the time I was done, I had more than a plan. I had a case, a strategy, and an audience. The trap was set. Now, all I needed was the right moment to spring it. They thought I was powerless, that I'd signed away my future and would just accept the end quietly. But the truth was, I hadn't given up. I just started fighting smart. While Mark and Sabrina were planning weekend getaways and buying new furniture, with my savings, I was planning something else entirely. Justice. The first step was gathering proof, and I took it seriously. Every day, I made it a point to document everything, quietly and thoroughly. When Sabrina mocked the way I cooked dinner, I noted it. When Mark suggested again that I start looking for retirement homes, I logged it. I kept a journal with times, dates, exact wording. It seemed small in the moment, but Teresa told me, "Consistency and details are gold in court. It shows a pattern." Then there were the recordings. I made sure to have my little recorder on me at all times. At first, I felt guilty, like I was doing something underhanded. But then I reminded myself, they were the ones trying to throw me out of the home I built. This was self-defense. Legal, calculated self-defense. One of the most damning recordings came on a Tuesday night when Sabrina thought I had gone to bed. I was in the hallway folding laundry and heard them in the living room. "She's never going to leave on her own," Sabrina hissed. "Just stop paying the bills. Shut off the internet. Make her uncomfortable. She'll get tired and go." "To how?" Which Mark replied, "She'll be gone by summer. She's not built for confrontation. She'll fold. She always does." I didn't fold. Instead, I copied that audio file 3 times and sent one to Teresa, one to my external hard drive, and one to the Elder Rights Watchdog group. Then came the finances. I logged into the online banking system. Yes, I still had access to a few joint accounts we hadn't completely untangled, and pulled copies of every transaction Mark had made using funds that were technically still tied to my name. Furniture, electronics, down payments on Sabrina's car. I built a spreadsheet. Then I printed the receipts. The legal case was growing teeth, but I didn't stop there. I reached out to the Real Estate Licensing Board anonymously, just to ask what kind of ethical standards were required of a licensed agent like Mark. Turns out, financially exploiting a family member was very much not something they took lightly. I filed a preliminary ethics complaint and attached some carefully chosen documents. I didn't expect them to act right away, but a black mark on his record was enough to cause ripples, and ripples were what I needed. Meanwhile, I stayed outwardly calm. I cooked dinner. I smiled when Sabrina told me they were going to replace my curtains. I played the part of the fading mother, docile, irrelevant. But inside, I was counting down. Teresa told me the court date was coming together faster than expected. Once filed, the injunction could put a temporary freeze on any attempt to evict me. If we won, which she was confident we would, ownership of the house could revert. There could be financial consequences for the exploitation. And if the watchdog group went public with the story once the case was underway, well, Mark's image as Mr. Local Family Man would take a hit he couldn't recover from. But even with all the strategy and planning, there was one more thing I had to do. I wrote Mark a letter. Not to mail, Not to give him, but to remind myself what this all meant. In it, I told him everything. How I felt when he betrayed me, what this house meant, how deeply he had wounded the very person who loved him unconditionally. I cried writing it. Then I folded it up, tucked it into my bedside drawer and told myself, he's going to understand, one way or another. The trap was ready. The evidence was airtight. The leverage was building. All I needed now was the right moment. And believe me, I was going to choose it. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my power and making damn sure they knew who they were messing with. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at myself. Not the tired version they saw every day, but me. The woman who raised a son, buried a husband, and built a life brick by brick. I wore the pearl earrings Henry gave me on our 25th anniversary. They were a reminder that I had loved fully, given everything. And now, I was taking back what was mine. When we walked into that courtroom, Mark looked confused, almost amused. He sat confidently beside Sabrina, his arm draped behind her chair, like he had nothing to fear. But when my attorney, Teresa, walked in with 2 thick folders and a quiet fire in her eyes, I saw his confidence crack. The judge was no nonsense. She reviewed the petition with the calm weight of someone who'd seen cases like this before. And then it began. Teresa laid everything out. My journal, the audio recordings, the financial statements. She played the clip of Sabrina whispering, "Just make her uncomfortable, she'll leave." The courtroom went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. Then came the emails, the texts, the printouts of my name still tied to household expenses, the copy of Henry's handwritten will. And finally, the cherry on top, the ethics complaint I'd filed, and the letter from the licensing board confirming they were opening an investigation. Mark's face turned from red to gray. Sabrina stopped making eye contact entirely. When it was their turn to respond, they had nothing of substance, just weak denials, vague claims about misunderstandings, and a feeble attempt to paint me as forgetful and confused. The judge wasn't buying it. Before the hearing adjourned, she granted a temporary injunction that barred them from making any changes to the property. The case for full reversal of the deed transfer was moving forward. If successful, the house would return to my name. Sabrina muttered something under her breath as we exited. Mark didn't say a word. But the real confrontation? That came later. A week after the hearing, I asked them both to sit down in the living room. They shuffled in like sulking children. I handed them copies of the case summary and the board's pending investigation notice. Then I looked Mark square in the eyes. "You were supposed to protect me," I said. My voice didn't shake. "I gave you everything because I believed in you, because I loved you, and you tried to make me disappear." He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up my hand. "You don't get to rewrite this. I have the truth now. And whether the law finishes the job or not, this house, this story, it's mine. And from this moment on, you have 2 choices. Make it right, or walk away knowing you tried to rob your own mother." Sabrina scoffed, grabbed her bag, and walked out. Mark followed quietly. A week later, they moved out. The community group published the story, anonymously, at my request, but people knew. His business took a hit, his public image shattered, and me? I stayed. The rose bush is gone, but I'm planting a new one this spring. Henry would have liked that. The legal case is ongoing, but the balance has already shifted. Teresa says there's a strong chance I'll regain full ownership. Even if I don't, they can't touch me again. I've ensured that legally, emotionally, and I've started helping others, quietly mentoring women in similar situations, sharing my story, teaching them what to watch for, what not to sign, what questions to ask. Because now I know, love can blind you, but that doesn't mean you let it steal your life. Mark made his choice, and I made mine. I reclaimed my home, my dignity, my voice. And if that isn't karma, I don't know what is.